As Christians, we must always remember that education is a means to an end, not an end in and of itself. Every educational philosophy has a goal, whether or not we are aware of it, and a reason for studying. Welcome to the 17:6 podcast, where we help you turn the world upside down by the Lordship of Christ. I'm Trevor.
I'm Caleb.
I'm Zach.
Boy, that paragraph ended way sooner than I thought. I should have read it beforehand. So that quote was by Israel Wayne. It's a book that you read, Zach?
Yeah.
What's the name of the book?
Education. Does God have an opinion?
Ooh,
It was a good book.
Awesome.
sounds like a good book.
I've never heard of him. Is he?
Yeah, so I discovered him because I went to a conference called the Teach Them Diligently conference here about a month and a half ago or so.
Yeah.
And he was one of the speakers at the conference. And I was like, man, that was a well thought out talk. And I'm going to pick up some books by him.
Cool.
And here we are.
Awesome.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So,
How are you guys?
episode 21.
Episode
I'm great.
21. Yeah.
I'm great.
21.
I'm great. Yeah, 21. Episode 21. Which means that we are now in the top 1% of podcasts, evidently.
Top 1%.
Love it.
So if
99% would have died by now.
If you're still with us this far in, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's just get it over with. Get your joke over with.
Wow. That was a horrible lead up. Now everybody's going to know that I'm telling a joke. You just got to be natural, Trevor.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think maybe this time I'm just going to look at Trevor right in the eyes when I tell this joke and see. But I'm afraid I'm going to mess it up if I do it that way. So, I hired a handyman this week, come over to the house. And I gave him a list. Look at his face. I gave him
Already laughing.
a list of things to do. And I left, and then when I came back, he'd only done items 1, 3, and 5. So it turns out he only does odd jobs.
Mm.
Yep, he sure does.
Yeah. It would have been better if it would have been tucked away in the middle of a conversation.
See, that's what yeah.
You're right.
Well,
Next time,
Let's start over.
every party needs a
Yeah.
pooper.
start over. Now he knows the joke. I'm going to have to pull my second joke for the second episode.
All right. Well, great. So, what's our topic here?
Well, education, right?
Yep. Educating children specifically.
There was a little clue
This shouldn't be divisive at
in
all.
the beginning. No.
We've
Yeah.
gotten into 21 episodes, so we're like, let's do an episode that,
All Christians agree on.
yeah, and everyone's gonna have really strong opinions about.
Yeah,
So here we are.
Yeah,
here we are.
But hey, us three all agree on it. So
we do. We do. Us three.
Yeah, if you came for the
Us three.
debate,
Yeah. The producer, maybe not so much. It's okay. It's okay.
if you came
Maybe
for
he'll chime in.
yeah, maybe.
He should. He's got a mic.
He does have a mic.
Yeah.
So occasionally, if you don't see any of our mouths moving, but you hear a voice, it's not the one guy off camera.
It's the guy on
It's
the coffee cups.
Fourth guy off camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the guy on the coffee cups,
mm-hmm.
which there's a magic coffee cup here.
over here.
Well, you want to jump into those
Yeah.
those questions?
Yeah. I can jump into the questions. So, what type of education do we all use? You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So for me, we do homeschooling in my family, specifically classical conversation. So it's a classical Christian education curriculum, and I'm just convinced that homeschooling is the best for us. I mean, You could do private Christian education, and that's fine. I really tend to stay towards, I just really like the homeschooling model. So,
Yep. So we do the very same thing. So I think as far as order of importance goes, obviously for us, we're going to say Christian is the number one priority. We want our kids to have a Christian worldview as we're teaching everything. We want their worldview to be thoroughly integrated into everything. So it's not like you have math over here, English over here, then history over here, and then Christianity or religion over here as a subject all to itself, but it's integrated within all the different things that we'll be talking about. So that'd be the number one. But Trevor, you mentioned classical, which is not a super common, like, it's not like you go to the average person on the street and they understand, well, oh, you're a classical educator. I get what you mean by that. Yeah. So do you want to give like a little summary on that?
So I'm the youngest here of home educating my kids. So I'm probably going to be not giving a full definition. So pick up where I mess up.
Okay.
Classical education. So right now, my kids, I'll just tell you where my kids are kind of focusing on. We're focusing on memorization. And I think is that considered grammar? Is that yeah? So that's considered the grammar phase. So we just memorize a lot of stuff. Turns out my kids know how to count by 15s, and my son is only 5. So that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It's just an example. So I don't know. That's all I can really speak to right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm still learning so much right now. You know how you get into a subject and you study it a little bit, and now you know more than the average person, and now you're the biggest fish in a small pond. So I felt like I was kind of in that spot where I'd done a little bit of studying on this stuff, and I knew more than the average person. So I felt like I was like, yeah, I pretty much understand what I'm talking about. And then I started doing a deeper dive because we had those speeches last week, and I wanted more confidence in what I was saying. So I started doing more research and found out that I don't know what the heck I'm talking about. Like, there's so many people that know all these different things, and I don't know near as much as I thought I knew. So when it comes to classical education, how to define it is, I'm finding to be really difficult. There are just all kinds of different perspectives on it, but I think overall what we're saying is, for the sake of simplicity, I'm saying classical education is using a form of education that is contrasted to modern education. So that's kind of like saying, hey, we're going to use a model that's from before the 19th century.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, which is a really broad spectrum right there.
Right. So could you say that, do you know where the classical model started from? Was it like the Greeks?
Yeah, usually when we refer to classical education, what we were referring to was something that was started with, the Greeks, and when you think of like Greek philosophy and that kind of thing. And that's kind of where the root of it is. I believe it was Seneca who first used the phrase, the liberal arts. We want to teach people the liberal arts, which from my understanding was his way of saying there are people who, to make a living in life, they have to work with their hands, and we want to teach people to work with their heads, and we want them to have skills that are going to teach them to think well. And that was where the phrase liberal arts, it was arts meaning like skills and abilities, but these are skills that will liberate you from being tied to work with your hands,
to be more creative maybe. Mm-hmm. So it's really maybe becoming a jack of all trades type thing, because you're well-rounded. I think in the
when it's executed in the best way possible. Again, I say again, but a conversation you and I had on last Wednesday was, it seems like, and I'm going to use modern terminology to describe something that happened it started in like the 9th century and got more solidified in the 12th century. But it seems like there had been kind of something of a white collar, blue collar divide, where you had people who were really good with thinking. They knew their philosophy. And the problem was they didn't know how to use a hammer. Like they didn't have practical skills, but they could, have all these really deep conversations. On the other end of the spectrum, you had guys who they knew how to use the hammer. They're blacksmiths and that kind of thing. They knew how to do stuff, but they because they had not been trained on how to think, they weren't able to actually worship God at a deep level. And so this guy named Hugh of St. Victor, I guess he took that idea of the 7 liberal arts, and he also emphasized the fact that we need to be learning these practical skills as well. And that is what creates you or gets you there for a well-rounded education. So you're able to think really well and able to use your hands really well as well.
Yeah. Cool.
So that's, and I do the same thing, classical education.
Yeah.
So how do we use education to fight current culture?
In my opinion, I think that's really the main tool to fight culture at large. So I think society is built on education is a major part of society. So if we are not, as Christians, really honing in on how our children are being educated, and that can look at in different ways. So for us, it is home education. So that's the approach that we're taking. If we're not really honing in on that and really focusing on how our kids are being taught, then society's not going to get any better, because who's going to be the workers, the leaders of our society going forward is going to be our kids. Mm-hmm. So what's their worldview? And so we are trying to fix that. So I think that's a major way to fight against society.
Yeah, I mean, just the teaching them the worldview thing, not trying to separate that from all the other aspects of learning as well. I think you summed it up nicely.
Yeah.
So what role should we have as fathers in our kids' education?
I think that's a really, really good question, because it's going to look different for every family, I think. I think at the very least, in my opinion, that the father should be cheering on the wife and be encouraging the family to keep learning at the very, very least. Like there's got to be some support on the father's side. So when the sons come in and tell the father of what they've learned, and tell the dad what they've learned and what they're thinking, like the dad should be joyous, overjoyed, and just be interested in it. I think that's just practical fatherly advice. But
yeah,
and the same way with the father with the wife, like he needs to go in and just encourage her and just ask how things are going and just listen. And again, that's husbandly advice, but should just tell her to keep going.
Yeah. Something that has, I don't know, it makes sense to me, but this applies in so many different realms. But anytime you have people who are in the trenches doing the work, because they are focused on the details, it's easier for them to lose sight of the overall picture. You know, you lose the forest for the trees, right? And I think one of the really important things for the father to do, because it's primarily the mother who's doing the educating, is for the father to remind her of the forest. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Because she can get so, and this happens, like, it's not just, you know, mothers who are homeschooling doing this. This is pretty much almost any field of, you know, you're going into it and you get stuck in the weeds of something, right? So just it's the responsibility of the leaders in that situation to be reminding them of the big picture, the forest. Here's what we're doing. You're not just teaching them how to, you know, do 2 + 2 = 4. You're teaching them a worldview, and this is what's going to be changing and shifting culture.
And moving on from that, I think the father should step in and at least know what's going on in the curriculum, so there can be questions poked at the dinner table. It can be talked about what they learned today at school. I think that's really good. The father, I mean, I need to be engaged. So right now, like I said, my oldest son's 5, and so my middle child's 3.5. It's going to turn 4 here in December. So my thought is, I mean, my wife is going to be primarily the educator for right now, but once they hit adolescence, my role is going to change. Like I expect to take more of an education role somehow. Is that them coming to work with me and me teaching them my trade? Is that us getting more out of the house and doing things together and teaching them that way? It has to change, because at that point they're not boys, they're turning into men. So their mind is going to change a bit, and they need that older man to really direct them in that moment. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah. As far as my involvement, in addition to the whole setting the vision thing and overall just support, but if there is an area of education that a father is particularly interested in. So for me, I love history, right? I love history. So one of the things I started doing was reading little biographies to my kids. It's just ways for me. They're learning history, and I'm able
Right.
to nerd out on history with it's simplified stuff, right? But at the same time, it's we get to, well, first off, as you know, as a family, we get to bond over that kind of thing, right? But also, I'm actually contributing to their education in a tangible way, right? So
Yeah.
that'd be one thing I would suggest to the fathers if they're wanting to, and I think you should be involved in the education. What are you naturally interested in, and how can you get that to a level where you can be teaching your kids that, so you can take, you know, some of the load off of mom.
I think it's really good. One thing that I really like, and my kids don't know any different, is that we do school all year. We do a type of school all year. So, I mean, we kind of lessen the load a little bit, but like continually doing math and reading and stuff. So it's pretty cool. And my kids don't know any difference, and they love it. So, yeah.
Yeah, summertime can kind of be detrimental to educating your kids in general. You know, it's just they're gone for however many months.
Yeah.
They stop doing anything, and it's, you know, they kind of.
Yeah. And
I don't think about it. If I stop doing something for months,
Yeah.
I don't. You know, I'm older, so I don't retain information as well as kids do. But
I'm not saying we do it perfect. It's just an interesting thing that my kids really do like. And I say kids, like my 3.5-year-old still chimes in and takes part on what we're doing in our lessons, but they look forward to doing school every day, which is really, really neat.
so Trevor kind of touched on it a little bit, but the differences in educating boys and girls. I know we're not quite there yet of our boys transitioning into men, but I know that you guys have given it thought.
I don't know if I'd use that word transition.
From boys to men. That's okay,
As
right?
long as it's not
That's
from
fine.
girls to boys.
Yeah.
No, yeah. I'm sure you guys have given it some kind of, you know, some thought of in the future, what am I gonna, you know, how am I gonna approach this, and what are your thoughts on the differences in educating boys to girls, and what is your role different in that, or is it, you know, how does it look?
Well, first off, you are alluding to the more like the older years, middle school, high school years, right?
Yeah.
So do you think there's a difference even in the elementary years?
Do I think there's a difference?
I don't think it's as
think-
drastic.
Yeah.
It's not as drastic for sure, but I just know that there are a lot of people who are of that persuasion that, you know, even a 6-year-old boy is going to be learning a lot different than a 6-year-old girl.
Yeah.
And right now I don't have, you know, the same age for both. So I'm, you know, our daughter is just now entering into this stuff. So I'm just now learning on what educating a girl is like, you know, so I don't really have a good, I don't have any experience to compare the two, I guess is what I'm trying to say, as far as educating them.
I know. So my daughters are a little bit older than your daughters, but I know that as far as education goes, my daughters definitely learn different, but I think all kids learn differently too.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, it's not a cookie cutter. That's the good thing about home education, is it's not a cookie cutter that type of deal. My oldest son learned to read using a certain curriculum, and that one didn't work for my oldest daughter. So we shifted gears, and so I think they learn differently, yes, but I'm not sure at this age that there's, you know, I'm sure there's there are differences in how you approach teaching them things.
Yeah. I do know that the stereotype that's on the boy, that he's squirrely and wiggly and that kind of thing, and the stereotype that the girl's going to learn how to read earlier because she can sit still and that kind of thing, that does not apply for my daughter. She is squirrely and wiggly and, you know, wants to be moving all the time. But I just didn't know if your experience played that out or not. But
I think they're all
okay.
squirrely and wiggly. I mean, and you know, my son has picked it up quicker than my daughter has. I don't know that that's a boy girl thing or just a personality thing or what it is, but
Yeah.
we were able to have that patience with them though.
Yeah. This isn't specifically homeschooling related. but homeschooling allows you the opportunity to do this more. So what happens when adolescence hits for my sons? I'm expecting them to be young men, and so I'm going to push them. I don't want them to be a kid. I mean, I would love for them to stay the age that they are. I really do love that, but I don't want them to. They're expected to do more. I don't want them to sit around the house and play video games. So I want them to be men. I want to move towards that situation. So homeschooling is giving me that opportunity once they hit adolescence. So now they can come, like I said, now they can come to work with me. I'm going to teach them what I do. I want them to take over my business. I want them to grow my business bigger than what the Lord has allowed me to grow it. So by the time they get finished with homeschooling, they should be able to hit the ground running, which again, homeschooling gives you that opportunity. And that's not homeschooling specific, but with this worldview that we have, this biblical worldview, we look in scripture and it's like, oh, they're not supposed to be lifelong kids. They, so yeah, I think there's going to be some difference. Now, my daughter, I wouldn't expect the same out of her in that same way, because I expect her to be a godly wife one day. And so what does that look like? That doesn't look like running a business. Not according to scripture. She's going to be managing the household, and that's a high task. So I do expect my wife to be able to pour more into her at that age as she has hit adolescence and becoming a young woman, and she's going to be able to learn how to manage and run a household well. And I think that's going to be amazing. So when she does have a family,
Yeah. I think something that our culture has gotten away from, and that you just straight up, you tackled that just a second ago, but yeah, making sure that you're equipping your sons to be able to take on the trade that you are doing. It doesn't mean that they're bound to that.
Right.
If the Lord does call them away from that, we would hope that we're able to hand them off a trade that they enjoy. But at the very least, give them a baseline so that they can enter at 18 the workforce and have some kind of skills that are valuable.
Yeah, that is super important, to be able to just go straight transition. There's that word again. To be able to move. I don't know. From
just redeem the word. We'll take it.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Transition from
It's the Lord's word.
Yeah.
right. Transition from being a young teenager to a successful person in the workplace, or starting a job, a business, or whatever that might look like. I think you don't see that as often. Well, you don't see that hardly ever today with society. They're trying to figure out what they're going to do. They're 25 and they're still they're not sure what they're going to do. They've been going to college for 7 years, but they've switched up majors here and there, and they're not sure what they're going to do.
Right.
So I think that.
So this brings out a good point, and it's coming out naturally, is that education is not our main goal. It's what's happening after education. We're preparing our kids to lead society, to lead our community. We want to build our community locally. We don't want our kids to go off, I don't think, unless the Lord calls them. I want my kids to stay around. I want to build beside them. So yeah, that's kind of the end goal. That's why we're talking about it like we are. So anyway, just wanted to throw that out there. It's and something else. We're not with there's stereotypes with homeschooling, and maybe not as much anymore, is we're not trying to isolate ourselves from society. We're just preparing our kids to enter society when they're mature enough. Right. I mean,
that's a good thing. Well, I don't think they're ever trying to isolate their kids. But the realization was that 6-year-olds don't make great missionaries. Like that's a really bad model. Like, I'm not going to send my 8-year-old to Iraq to convert the Muslims. I mean, and it's the same thing for, I'm not going to send my kids into a education system where they're intentionally trying to teach them a, quote, neutral worldview.
There's no such thing as neutrality.
Right.
No such thing.
So I think there are different circumstances for why you would choose different models of education, that kind of thing. But the missionary mindset just doesn't make sense. And the statistics bear that out, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think it just kind of goes into what you were saying. Like, we don't want to isolate them. I don't know if anyone's intention was ever to totally isolate them. Maybe like the Amish or something like that.
Right.
But in the 80s and maybe the 90s too, it was difficult to live in community with the homeschooling lifestyle. But I mean, I think in 2024 that is no longer even close to an issue.
Yeah.
There's just so many homeschoolers now.
We're just viewing it as the questions are going to come up. The hard questions are going to come up either in our house or in another area. We just want to be the ones that they go to, like any other parent.
Right.
So, and again, it's just a stereotype that people have with homeschool. And I just kind of wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that we're shielding them, yes, from what the world is teaching them right now, but it's because we want to train them in a certain way so that they can then go out and turn the world upside down.
Yeah, and think critically. And it's not that they're not getting those same questions within our education. Those tough questions are still asked, as far as I can tell. When I looked at like the middle school and really the high school years of the curriculum that we're using, there's some really difficult questions asked to really make you think through, to make sure you understand what you believe and understand the worldview that you're working with. So I think it's great. And if you start to falter there, I mean, you're within the home, you're in a safe place, right?
Right.
Like mom and dad are right there to help you through that.
Yeah. Timothy Mays, he actually had a really good analogy for this, but he was talking about the difference between like, if you are encountering an infection for the first time, an infection is probably a bad example. But some kind of illness. Like if you have, it's the whole immunization thing. If you, get like some kind of vaccination, my analogy is falling apart as I say it. If you get on the front end, you get the antibodies and it strengthens your immune system so you can take on that kind of stuff, as opposed to getting the full force of it, at some other time. That's kind of the idea that we're having. We want to introduce things to our kids, introduce other worldviews to our kids, but we want to do it in appropriate amounts at appropriate times, as opposed to, hey, you're 8 years old, go encounter this whole new worldview.
There's more than two genders. Huh?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, I mean, I have an example that, I mean, you just reminded me of something that as far as shielding your kids, we're definitely not doing that, because we still go out in public and our kids still see things. And my 9-year-old just the other day saw something, but we were able to have that conversation with him. We sat down and had an age appropriate conversation with him. And who knows him better than we do? I mean, I've been with him for 9 years. We can have that conversation of, this is why, this person is that way, or, we can talk about it and answer any questions that he has from a biblical worldview.
And every parent has that desire. They want to be the one answering the questions their kids has. But if they're in an environment where they're spending more time with their friends than they are with you, they're going to trust their friends more. And they're going to go to their friends for those answers to those questions. No parent wants that, to my knowledge. No responsible parent wants that. So,
and this might not seem like education,
right,
but it is. It all leads. It kind of leads back to that. This is why we home educate.
Yeah, what's that passage in Deuteronomy where you wake up and where you lie down?
Yeah, the Deuteronomy 6, the Shema, teach them diligently. The whole passage. But what you just said, it really brings out the distinction between modern education and classical education, because the idea that you have religion over here and you have math over here, that is a modern concept. Just historically speaking, Christians, as they're training up, they're teaching their kids diligently, all that went together. So they are crafting the worldview as they went through all these different things, which is exactly what you're talking about. Like we're wanting to integrate all that.
Yeah.
So are there any biblical examples of how we should be educating our children?
Well, the burden is definitely on the parents all the way through. And again, you can't have this modern view that you're separating all the different spheres of education. Like they're all integrated together. But we mentioned the Deuteronomy 6, Deuteronomy 10 or 11, whatever it is, that is calling the parents to teach their children. And it's teaching them things of religion. It's also just teaching them things of practical life. Think of Proverbs. How many times, my son, do this, my son, do that. all throughout the book of Proverbs, it's definitely like the tone is a father speaking to his child. So if you're wanting to know what does it look like for me to educate my kid, look at Proverbs. He's not just, okay, here is doctrine, here is what you need to believe on ethics. It's also just, here's good advice for life, just practical stuff. So we see the instruction continually to the parents to teach their kids.
What was the question again? Biblical mandate.
Yeah, are there biblical examples of how we should be educating our children?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree with everything Zach said, and I can't think of anything else. Rather, the passage of Deuteronomy where it says, teach your kids when they, wake up and lie down, and when you walk, down the road. Like, I think that is a mandate. Yeah, teaching them the law of the Lord, but everything is religious. There's no neutrality. So how are we teaching our kids everywhere we go? Right. And it's on, like you said, the burden of the parents. It's not, hey, bring them to Sunday school and they learn, the commandments of God. That's not what they're talking about. That's just, if we're only looking at the religious side of it. Sure. It's even the parents are teaching their kids theology.
So that was going to be my next question, was that, if, scripture tells us to educate our kids, if somebody maybe would push back on that and say, well, I am educating them by sending them to school. How is that? Like, what would your, not argument, but what would your response be to that?
So I understand the whole idea of delegation, and this is not an area where I would like put my foot on the ground and I accept no other views except my own. I don't think it's the natural reading of all the different passages, because of the fact that it is calling the parents to be the ones that are teaching. It doesn't say, Father, make sure that your children are educated in the Lord. That would definitely allow room for, so I could do it myself. I could have someone else do it. But the command is not, it's not that they're replacing the responsibility for making sure that gets done. They're actually giving you the responsibility to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I wonder if there's people that would say, well, this is talking about teach them scripture, separating, biblical principles from mathematics. And we're saying, no, we're bringing all that together. We're teaching them all of this, and they just intertwine together.
Because there's no distinction in scripture with that. We're just assuming that's what it means.
Right. And again, it's a modern concept. I'm not going to go into the history of, I'm not super well knowledgeable on exactly how that came into being, but it's just a modern way of thinking that we're going to separate things like that.
Yeah.
So what are you guys' thoughts, opinions on further education beyond, I'm specifically talking about college, even trade school, further beyond them being 18?
Well, whatever the Lord wills in their life, that's my top priority, wherever the Lord is calling them. But my opinion is, so I went to college, I have a degree in mathematics. I don't want my kids to go through that. It was just not a fun time, though. I did meet my wife in college, so that was the best money that I ever spent. No, I would actively try to tell my kids they don't need that, depending on where they're going, where the Lord's calling them. And even trade school, I hope that's not where the Lord's calling them. I really want them to take over what the Lord has started to allow me to build, my business. I really want them to take that over, and they don't need higher education to do that. They could I just teach them. I'll just teach them everything they need to know. And then of course, if we need outside help or whatever, we can do that. But college is not necessary for that. I don't think college is necessary for most jobs. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm probably just going to echo what Trevor said. I don't want that to be their default, but at the same time, I want to support them if wherever the Lord is calling them, it does require that. But that's how I want them to think through it is, I want to land here, therefore I need X, Y, and Z, right? But I just don't want the default to be like, so I must go spend a lot of money getting a degree.
Yeah. I'm I think I'm in agreement with both of you guys on that. I think that's why all of our goals are to build something, to build a business of some kind, is for our kids to eventually come in and take that over one day. And whenever they're 18, say, well, I can teach you what you need to learn. You don't need to go to college to figure out what you want to do. If my son is 15 and he says, or 16 or 17, and says, Dad, I want to weld because I know I can make a good living in that. I can provide well for my family. Then I'd say, all right, let's do it. You know, that's a trade. That's something that you can go learn to do and provide well for your family.
Yeah, but the modern day college university is, you know, it doesn't seem that they're bent on education. It doesn't seem they're bent on good education, if that makes sense. So trade school in my mind is even, it's just different. They're directly, like, they're focused on actually equipping. I don't think college, the modern day college and university system isn't. So it should change. Maybe if it was different, maybe looking back of like when Harvard was started and, you know, their main goal then, maybe I would have a little bit of a different view, but still, I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah. Would you say that I've not done any college, but would you say that we all know, I think I know what their main goal is, but would you say that part of their goal is to make you, when you get to college, to make you critically think? When we're saying we're teaching our kids right now to critically think.
Right. I would say they're in it for the money. That's going to be, the people might get really mad, but come on. That's the universities, they're in it for the money. Tuition's really expensive for no reason.
Really expensive.
But I would say professors at their best. So maybe I'm changing things up by specifically pinpointing
I think it's good.
Professors. I say the best professors are doing that. So a distinction between the best of professors and what we're saying is that the best of professors are exactly what you're saying. They are then, as the kid is 20, teaching them to think critically. And what we're saying is, we're doing that way earlier.
And the professors have a specific worldview they're wanting them to think critically through.
About,
So again, if your kids are not equipped and they go into that, they're going to be demolished.
It seems like there's been an increase in, and maybe it's just because I'm doing the research, so I'm starting to see it now, but universities and colleges that are actually leaning into classical models of education.
Really?
Yeah. Well, of course, you have forgot it.
New St. Andrews?
Yeah, that one. But Hillsdale,
Okay.
is another one. And my kids are nowhere near that level, so I haven't done a lot of research into it and that kind of thing. But I just know that it's been an ongoing discussion, is that there are more and more of these popping up as they're seeing the current state of education. Like, we got to do something, guys. Come on. And people they're doing things.
Nice.
So this is my last question.
Wow.
I know. Do you guys have anything else before I get into my last question? Everybody knows what the last question is.
Okay. Well, what are our thoughts on private Christian education?
Okay.
This idea of, so we're like, homeschooling seems great, but I don't feel like I'm capable of doing that. So I want to let an expert teach my child, though the expert will be teaching in a biblical worldview. So how do we feel? Again, we don't have hard stances on this. We're just I'm convinced that homeschooling is the best route, because as parents, we know our kids best, and them saying like, we're not experts in teaching the curriculum. True. We're not experts, but I think we can rise to the occasion.
I totally agree with how you worded that and everything. Just for those out there who are, I don't have the ability to do this. I think because like the whole point of the program we're a part of, the Classical Conversations, what it's attempting to do is to equip parents, especially those who don't feel equipped. Like it's giving them all the tools they need so they can do a really great job. And the phrase that we hear a lot is, I'm reclaiming my education, right? The moms are learning alongside the kids. And they're very, very well thought out moms, especially because they're having to think through all these things. So just because you don't currently feel equipped for it, there are programs out there that are specifically designed so that you can give your kids a really good education.
Yeah, you don't have to know everything day one,
Right.
Because your kid doesn't need to know
Right.
everything day one. Yeah.
You have the ability to learn along with them. Now, I will say that about the program that we use is that I know my wife has gone, I mean, already this year to 2 or 3 different, maybe more than that, different, not seminars, but like classes and stuff. I mean, you and I went to practicum together and with our wives,
Yeah.
not just the two of us, but
We're not that dedicated.
no, yeah. But there are all these training, what's the word I'm looking for? Exercises, classes,
conferences,
opportunities.
seminars,
Yeah. There's all these opportunities to learn and to be able to learn things on how to teach your kids well. Mm-hmm. There's a reason, like we have community day once a week, and it's not just a send your kid in there
Right.
to do it. There's a tutor in each class that's teaching not just the kid, but the parent tools to go throughout their week on how to do this, how to approach this, what we're doing throughout the week. So there are plenty of opportunities, plenty of things out there to learn along with your kids on how to do this. I think they use the term stick in the sand, which I don't fully understand that term, but I'm sure somebody
Simple.
out there, it's simple. Yeah. So, for people who don't feel equipped, there are opportunities to equip yourself to, if you don't feel. I think that to me is the number one option. But with that, I think private education, as long as it is from a classical standpoint and you share the same biblical worldview, I think it's a good second choice. Don't either say, well, I'm going to homeschool or send my kids to private school.
Mm-hmm.
I think
This brings up a good point because you said, same worldview. Homeschooling, you have to have a different mindset. Again, don't just do the state curriculum when you're doing homeschool.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, no one has got that from our conversation. We're not doing the state curriculum. So I don't know. I just wanted to point that out. I had somewhere else to go with that. I don't remember what I was going to say. Oh, well.
sorry.
Man, I thought
It was probably really good.
It really
was
it
really
was.
good,
It'd be
yeah.
the highlight of the podcast.
It was going to be really good because I
talked too long, I guess.
that's okay. You just keep talking amongst yourself. I'll think of it here in a second.
amongst yourself.
Zach, your beard looks good today. We're
right
waiting
on
on
board.
Trevor to.
Yeah, I'm not going to come up with it. You can go to that next question.
All right. So, how do we turn the world upside down?
Oh, I remember.
Oh,
So I knew it would work. So one of the best things about our curriculum, this classical model and classical conversations, we're not trying to sell anybody on it, but you guys should check it out. It's the idea that it's not, we're not doing this in isolation. We're doing this in a community. We have a group of people that we do homeschooling with. We meet, like you said, we meet once a week, but again, the moms do know each other pretty well. Like they talk throughout the week. We're not just going home and just focusing, we'll just stay over here. We're not going to talk to anybody. And I think that's huge. So that's the big selling point, in my opinion. It's not a cheap curriculum.
Right.
And Holly and I were discussing that. Like, man, it's not cheap. I wonder if there's something better that could be done. But there's not with the same idea of community, because that is huge.
Having mentors around, people like people who have done this. They've graduated their kids. They are in a spot where they can actually mentor you as you're doing this.
Exactly. So the stereotype is, oh, my kids will not have any social skills. Completely debunked with what we are attempting to do and what we are going through.
That may have worked in the 90s, but this is not the 90s
no,
anymore.
Right.
I would say all of our kids are very well socialized.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, so some of the arguments, homeschoolers are awkward. Teenagers are awkward. Period. Doesn't matter where you send them.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Yeah. Go talk to a teenager and tell me they're not awkward. Like, this is the weirdest conversation I've had today. Amos knows. Amos has teenagers. He knows.
That's great.
So how do we turn the world upside down? By the Lordship of Christ, but through education.
I think so. First off, if we're giving them a Christian worldview, of course they're going to have a whole different approach to entering into society and have that mission to turn the world upside down by the Lordship of Christ. I think that's pretty well the obvious one. As far as educating our kids in a way that's going to why do the whole classical education thing? It's going to teach them to think at a higher level, to think better. So first off, they can enjoy the world more because they can think deeper on God's creation, right? It's crazy how I'll be reading a book from an evolutionary standpoint, and they'll almost get to the point as they're digging into this topic where they praise evolution. Like Mother Nature is so genius in how she crafted everything and how over, 500 million years this evolved, and just so. And isn't that spectacular? And it's amazing how they'll come to that point where it's almost a paragraph that's just worshiping evolution. But the point I'm drawing from that is the more you look into these things, the better you think about these things, the more amazing and awe-inspiring they become. So we don't want Christians who don't know how to think deeply, right? We want them to be able to, know how to use a hammer, but also understand the intricacies of a hammer, right? So they can praise their creator for it. So I think that helps us turn the world upside down when we just have that mindset of the world is creation to be explored, which will move us to worship. And the better you think about it, the more you'll be moved to worship.
Yeah, I would say the end goal in mind, education is not the end goal. It's when our kids go out to the workplace. Just so the main focus, or the mission statement, I guess, of CC, Classical Conversations, is to know God and to make him known. If all of my kids, that's all they do at their job, to know God and to make him known, their work is going to be so much more deep, and it's going to be so much better than the person next to them because of their worldview and because of their work ethic, because of education, that they can't help but rise to the top. Yeah. And they can't help but turn the world upside down by the Lordship of Christ at that point.
Sounds good.
Okay. Wow. That was it. Well,
Beautiful.
hopefully we weren't too divisive. Well, I don't really, whatever. If we were, I guess.
We've been divisive in the past.
Yeah, head coverings.
Head coverings.
However, not many people watched that episode. I'm very surprised. Very surprised.
Bummer deal.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Predestination.
Yeah.
That one got a lot of views.
That
Did
one
get
did.
a lot of views.
Yeah. It
It
did.
was up there.
Yep.
Okay. Well, like us on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, comment. Make sure you comment. Make sure you if you have questions about this subject or previous subjects, let us know. You can email us, or you can just comment on Facebook or YouTube or TikTok, because we do want to answer them. We do want to answer those questions.
Let's address that real quick. We are reading the questions.
Yep.
We are reading questions, and we do plan on getting back to people.
Yeah.
Just in the right time.
Yeah. Haven't we gotten back to everybody?
Have we?
I thought we have.
I don't read the answers. I just read the questions. That's my role.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's
makes
a good point.
Ah.
That's a good point. Okay. Well, thanks for watching the 17:6 podcast, where we turn the world upside down by the Lordship of Christ.
I'm sure you laugh at that, but you don't laugh at my joke.
You're right. Oh, I need more coffee.
Tell you what, that one started off very slow.
You know what? You're 100% right. It did.